Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Wholehearted Living series. I can't wait for you to hear what my next guest has to say. She is a yogi, a speaker, and a life coach, and she knows all about wholehearted living because that's what led her to becoming a life coach. So her name is Bridget Dinan.
Janine.
Yeah. I knew I'd get it wrong. Sorry, I'm having one of those days.
All good.
So, I would love for you just to jump right in and say what wholehearted living is to you.
I love this question so much because, there's a short answer and there's a long answer. And to me, the short, simple answer is being yourself. And of course that sounds really simple and too good to be true. And in some ways, I guess it kind of is, because at the end of the day, there's so many things that go into being yourself. But in essence, I feel like wholehearted living means giving yourself space to be who you are in all areas of your life. So often I find that we end up kind of, brushing away certain parts of our personality or locking things away because they don't fit with what we think we should be doing in life. The thing that's not going to make you money, but you're passionate about it. So you forget about it. And it's been 15 years since you picked up your guitar or what have you. Things like that kind of get in the way and end up making us feel like we're a shell of our former selves. And in my work as a coach, I meet so many women who have been living like that for so long that it's almost like they don't even really know who they were in the first place. So to me, wholehearted living isn't just that end result where you are fully yourself, ta-da. Wholehearted living is really every step that it takes to get there. It's each time you decide, okay, I'm going to actually drop into myself and see what I want right now. I'm going to take a bold step. I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to say yes to this marriage. Every single time, every decision that you make, and every practice that you start to integrate into your life in order to be more present, more connected to who you are, and more brave in the way that you live your life. I think all of that is what comes together to result in wholehearted living.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad you used the word brave because I think it's such a big part of it, isn't it?
I really do think that it is, especially in a world that often feels like it's at odds with our values or at odds with our well-being. It's a big deal to say time out. I don't know if I want to live this way. I get that everybody else is doing this, but I don't know if it's for me. That's a big deal to take that step and to say, I'm going to step off the beaten path. This one, probably the first quote that I read that kind of stuck with me for the majority of my life, and I had it framed beside my bed when I was a teenager, and it said, "Courage, do not follow where the path may lead, but instead go where there is no path and leave a trail." And I feel like I'm just now starting to really understand the complexity of that and how scary that actually is. It sounds lovely and it's a great meme to post on Facebook. But then when you get into the daily ins and outs of what that actually looks like, darn it, courage is tough. And actually living, marching to the beat of your own drummer does really take a lot of strength. And it's a piece that often I don't think we talk about, and we like to focus on the bright, shiny part and the end result. But for sure, there's some work in there. There's some bravery.
There absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you and I have discussed it ahead of time, so I would love for you to share with our viewers what you think your tips, whether it's 3 or just general inspiration, for people to live a wholehearted life.
For sure, for sure. So just before we dive into the 3 steps that I'm really passionate about helping people to learn and to integrate, I also just kind of wanted to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to wholehearted living, which is that often it sounds like something that's just meant for the privileged. It sounds like something that you get to do if you're rich, or if you have all the time in the world, if you win the lottery or have a wealthy spouse, then you have this time to really feel open and expansive and embrace all of this stuff. But I often find that a lot of people obviously aren't living in that particular situation. And it feels like wholehearted living is then not for you. But I also want to challenge that assumption today, because there are ways, no matter where you find yourself in life, there are ways that you can start to reclaim your power and start to bring your well-being back into focus. And so I think it's important to address that, just because, again, it can feel like this thing that's sort of beyond arm's reach. It's something that you might never actually get to. But I've seen it time and time again, people that, weren't born on third base, as it's sometimes said, who do still manage to make that decision, that brave decision for themselves to say, you know what, I'm going to make up some of my own rules now, and I'm going to start living according to my own values, even when they're at odds with the world around me. And so that'll come out a little bit in the 3 tips that I want to share today. Very practical ways that no matter your life circumstances, you'll be able to start unpacking some of that stuff so that you can step more fully into who you are and live from that place. So the first step that I wanted to share is to stop shoulding on yourself. And I like to say that because that's kind of how it feels, right? When we're putting pressure on ourselves to act in a certain way, or to make certain choices, or even to maintain certain relationships or arrangements, but it really doesn't resonate with us, like, it feels crappy. It really is not nice to be living in that place. And so often it's not something that we question, especially when it's being reflected by the world around us, when it seems like, oh, well, everyone else is doing this, I shouldn't complain. I should just be grateful. These are all ways that people, I find, tend to sort of silence what their truth actually is. So I think it's so important to start by examining our thoughts. So the tiniest little turtle step to take in this particular direction is mindfulness, is that self-awareness. Just starting to kind of take inventory or notice on throughout the course of your day. Notice what sorts of messages you're giving yourself that start with "I should," and that's going to be a clear indicator of where perhaps you're closing yourself down or shutting off your own heart in order to maybe please other people, or to make more money, or whatever it is. But yeah, step number 1, always to examine your thoughts and to recognize the places where you're telling yourself you should be one way, but really you don't want to be, or really maybe that's not who you truly are. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And it's great because you say to learn to stop shutting off your heart. That's so the opposite of what we're here to discuss. So I'm glad you've mentioned that. I'm really glad you brought up the elephant up in the room, because I think that's important, and that's something that isn't discussed ever, really. So thank you very much for going there.
For sure. Yeah, and when it comes to the way that we should on ourselves, I can remember for myself, kind of at the beginning of when I started to decide, when I started to live according to my own rules. It was at a point where I felt heavily invested in the life that I had chosen for myself, especially with the way, the school system is set up, where we're supposed to figure it out at a very young age, and that's not very realistic. So, I remember having gone to school and invested all this time and money in a particular program, and I had my sights set on like graduate school for the next thing in that same path, but it really wasn't fitting. It wasn't landing, and I was very convinced that I owed it to myself. I owed it to my parents. It would be stupid to not continue, because it would mean that I had wasted all this time. And so, so often we convince ourselves that it's too late, and that if we made a decision long ago, that we're just kind of stuck with it and we've got to tough it out. But, as the kids say, YOLO, you only live once. And so I really think that it isn't ever too late. And it behooves us to really give ourselves that opportunity, give ourselves permission to change our course, to turn left, because at the end of the day, we're going to be the only ones who lose out if we don't make that choice for ourselves. So yes, let's stop shooting on ourselves.
That's a very, very good starting point. So moving on from there, and I think we've already touched on it, I think your next point was leading towards strength in your truth.
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about helping people to learn how to sense their truth. So very often we rely on our thinking mind. We rely on the rational brain to direct the cruise ship that is our life. And as we just discussed, often our minds will tell us what we should and shouldn't do in a way that doesn't really resonate with us. And so the important thing is to start to sense your truth. And in other words, that means getting out of your head and into your heart. getting out of all of those thoughts that are kind of jumbled up in your head and sending you in directions that don't actually resonate, and drop into your own presence, drop into the felt experience of your body in this moment. You know, so many of us, myself included, get so wrapped up in our minds, especially when we're focused on a goal or accomplishing something, that it almost feels like we're just this floating head kind of, you know, wandering around through life. And there's like this wealth of information that's all just south of this border that we can tap into at any time in order to better navigate our best course, and to live our best life, and coming back to the whole title of the series, to live a wholehearted life. And so sensing your truth means to tune into the wisdom of your body. And our bodies speak to us in different ways. And so it's important to kind of, you know, educate yourself around the way your body communicates with you. And so I would love to share with everybody today this tool that I learned through Martha Beck, who's my life coach mentor. I think she mentions it in her book, Finding Your North Star, if I'm not mistaken. And it's called the Body Compass. So depending on sort of what you're into, you might think of this as being intuition. You might think of it as seeing clearly. But what it comes down to is tuning into sensation in your body and recognizing which sensations arise when your body says yes, which means that you're, you know, drawn to something, and noticing what sensations appear in your body when your true answer is no. And so very often it's, you know, our minds will convince us that we should be doing something, and then inside it feels yucky, but we convince ourselves we need to do it anyway. And so if we got out of our heads and into our bodies, in that case, we would sense our truth that the answer would be no, that's not the path for me. And then on the other hand, there are things that give us energy, that light us up. You know, you'll start to feel open and expansive and vibrant when you think about doing it. But if it doesn't make sense, then often we say, nope, I'm not going to do that. People might think I'm crazy, or that, you know, it's not logical, it doesn't make any sense for somebody like me to be doing that. And so again, we shut off our hearts and we go with the rational mind. And so we're just missing out on so much. We're missing out on so much of that fullness of life by doing that. And so I wanted to invite our audience today just to take a moment actually to kind of settle into your body. And just as you're listening here, I'm going to invite you to bring to mind some happy memory, some situation in your life that you were like, wow, I can't believe that this is happening to me. It's an amazing event, or maybe it's a person you really like spending time with. Just kind of taking a moment to bring some positive memory to mind. And maybe take a few deep breaths as the image of it sort of develops in your mind's eye.
Oh,
and as you do this,
sorry, can I interject just to say it doesn't have to be that big, because my thought that popped into my head was taking my dogs for a walk this morning and they were running around and being silly.
Okay.
So that's what I'm going to focus on.
I love it. I love it. Even better. Yeah. So sometimes we can totally just do the quick and dirty version where it comes up right away. And I love it when that happens, because, you know, we're wired for it. And that's like, Iona, just what you described there shows us that the wiring is there. We're meant for it. Our bodies know how to tell us this stuff. So yeah, whether it's walking your dogs in the park and they're being silly, what have you, just bringing that positive memory to mind and notice what it feels like in your body. So Iona, when you think of that situation, what sensations arise? Like, where do you feel that happiness most in your body?
In my heart and in my tummy, because I was actually laughing out loud. I looked like the crazy lady. And so those are the feelings that get brought back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, those feelings.
Yeah.
Those feelings. So in your heart, what does it feel like?
Warm
mm-hmm.
and velvety.
Oh, I love it. Warm and velvety. Yeah. So Iona, in your case, when you're faced with a decision, does it make you feel warm and velvety? That's when you know that that's your real truth. If it doesn't feel warm and velvety, and we'll get to the negative part in a moment, but when it doesn't feel that way, then you'll know that your deep down truth, your wholehearted response, then would be in the other direction. So let's go ahead and take a moment to do that now. And just think about a situation that felt not so hot, you know, something that, you know, was not an amazing, it doesn't have to be the worst thing that ever happened, but maybe just you're stuck in a meeting with somebody whose company you don't enjoy. Something as simple as that might do the trick. And same thing, just kind of breathe into it for a moment, drop into your body and notice what sensations are arising there. Yeah. And so typically what I find is that for myself, when I went through this exercise for the first time, and when I share it with people, so often the body's no response has something to do with heaviness or constriction or tension. Did you feel any of those things, Iona, when you were just thinking about it?
I did, and I'll share something. I was taken back to a time when I was on holiday with my family.
Mhm.
It was a long time ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and we were in Italy. I do not speak the language. We were on a train, and I can't remember if we we're going to Rome or somewhere. And I suddenly sat up and said, I think we're on the wrong train. I just had a I felt uncomfortable and didn't know. Anyway, my whole family trusted me. We got off the train and we were on the wrong train. So, yeah, and so everyone proceeded to make fun of me for the rest of the trip. But it was an uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah. So your instincts are strong, and again, you might should on yourself in that situation think, oh, I shouldn't disrupt everyone. I shouldn't take the chance because what if I'm wrong? All of that stuff. And it's amazing to hear you talk about how you just listened to your gut and you were right. It's amazing.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. But that's the thing, is that it's amazing how often we land in the right place when we start to invite the body back into the conversation. So it's not to say that there's no place for the mind, that we should just live in the body, but it's about this marriage between the two. If we can kind of take the big cues from our heart, from our body, from that physical sensation, and then use our minds to figure out the detail and how to actually make it work, then that's when we're living in better alignment, so that it's like our mind is in service of our heart and our soul rather than the other way around. So checking into your body, and notice how the body responds physically when it's a no. Notice how the body responds physically when it's a yes. And just start to invite that into your decision-making process. And so a really small way you can start to do that is even with things like whether or not you want to go to a particular social function, or what you want to have for lunch, or what type of exercise routine you want to do on a particular day. Just giving yourself that space to maybe diverge from the plan so that you can explore what feels truer for you.
And then that way, when it's the smaller decisions, people will start getting tuned in to this is what their body's doing. Mm-hmm. So when it becomes to the bigger decisions, then they'll trust it more, I think is what you're saying.
Exactly. So it will become more attuned. It's like the messages get stronger, because it's like if we don't listen to our bodies, then they kind of start to shut down. And for a million reasons, our bodies start to shut down, right? So it's like an invitation into the conversation again. And then our bodies start to trust that we'll listen, and that communication gets strengthened. And I'm a really big fan of tiny little steps, right? So it's so important to strengthen the muscles, because otherwise it just all feels like too much. It all feels too scary. So why bother starting? Like, for instance, is Bridget telling me I should quit my job because my gut says so? Well, maybe, but maybe not today. Maybe for today, you want to decide if you would rather have a shake for breakfast or an egg, and just start there. Because it's important to give ourselves that space, to be able to explore, rather than just kind of pulling the rug right out from under ourselves. It takes time to attune the body compass and to practice these skills. And so, yeah, it's a lovely thing to not pressure ourselves to get it right off the bat for all the big decisions.
Yeah. And with that, so it's learning to speak up and trusting yourself with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that does bring us, in fact, to the final piece, the ribbon on top, to tie it all together, which is, of course, to start to speak up for yourself. And this is, of course, when people start to get scared again. It's like, okay, I'm not going to shit on myself. I'm going to figure that out. And great, I'm tuning into my body. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, what? I have to tell somebody what I want? Wait a second, I have to take action? I don't know. And then we kind of end up back at the beginning sometimes, which is totally fair and a very human response to this whole process. But yes, of course, at the end of the day, in order to make real changes in this direction, in order for your life to start to feel more wholehearted, you're going to have to speak up for yourself. And it takes courage. It takes compassion for the challenge that lies in that. And it comes back again to bravery in terms of what we were talking about at the top of our chat. And the same approach I find works really well here. So you don't need to speak up about the biggest, baddest thing in your life right away, where the stakes feel the highest, but maybe just start practicing speaking up for yourself in little ways. And some of the little ways that I like to recommend and that have worked for me in the past are things like, if you're watching TV with a friend or your partner, being honest about what you feel like watching. How many times do we say, oh yeah, it's fine. but it's really not, and maybe it is fine, but that's a learned habit, right? So we've just kind of like lulled ourselves into this sense of everything being fine. And so to awaken again and just tune in, do I really want to watch this particular show? And I personally, I don't like action. It's very boring to me. And so I started getting honest. It's like, yeah, I don't really want to. It doesn't mean I never watch those things if my partner wants to, but it just means that I'm not going to pretend that I'm enjoying it too, or that I'm feeling as fulfilled and as happy about the experience. So yeah, starting to speak up in those small ways. And it's the same process that we talked about. Then you start to build your muscles. You recognize, oh, I can speak up and I can say what I want or what I don't want. It was actually received just fine by this person. The sky did not fall. And so then maybe over time you can start to speak up in bigger and bigger ways that feel more near and dear to your heart. But yeah, you'll have that lived experience of knowing what words to use, for instance. Sometimes that practice can be difficult too, is even knowing what to say. So getting back to remembering that you have a choice and to actually articulate what it is that you're looking for, that you want for yourself, is so huge. And it really is that final step.
It is. And that's just the word that pops to my mind when you say that is being authentic. So we're learning to trust ourselves, tune in, and speak up for ourselves, and all that. It's about being authentic. So if you let's use you as an example, then if you are going to force yourself to watch action movies when you don't want to, your partner's not actually getting to know you. He'll just think that you love action movies, and that's brilliant. She's awesome. But in order to get to know you, you have to risk that, being authentic. So it's laying yourself bare a little bit, but that's what people will fall in love with, and that's how people will connect.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. And that actually just reminded me of a piece of marriage advice that I got from my husband's aunt before we got married. She said, begin as you intend to continue. And I thought that was brilliant, because speaking of authenticity, how many times have we thought to ourselves, oh, well, I'll just go along with it this one time and not say anything about it. But then we've created this expectation, or we've created this illusion that that's who we are, or that's what we enjoy. And so, like you said, we're not able to relate to people as authentically if we're putting up this screen, or just, going along with a plan for the sake of not rocking the boat, or seeming to be charming or easy to get along with, if at the end of the day that person isn't really who we are. So yeah, begin as you intend to continue. Although at the same time, I would say, even if you want to change gears halfway through, do that too, because it doesn't mean that, just because you didn't start in one way, that you can't change later on. And that, in fact, is the work that many of us are doing, is to say, I started this way, I'm kind of halfway into, I'm waist deep in this particular path, but I don't know if I want it anymore. And so it's never too late to call that time out, to check in and just start to redirect back to your own heart, for sure. Yeah. I love how that just popped into my mind. I'll always remember that advice.
Well, and that's perfect, because also, as you're saying, you don't begin as you mean to continue. However, we're all allowed to change our mind, which is perfect. You said that, and it's like, so even if you're being true to yourself, you're being authentic, you're going this way. If you decide, oh, hang on, I want to swing a right or a left here, you're absolutely able to. You shouldn't feel stuck, and we all evolve, we all change, and that is part of human nature.
Absolutely. And it strikes me too that, for those people that might be thinking to themselves, that it's too late, let's consider how maybe you're shitting on yourself in that situation. I shouldn't change my mind. That's not a fair thing to do. I should put their needs above mine. I should stay the course. But again, if you're telling yourself those things, but in your body there's that that inner turmoil going on, if there's that sinking feeling, then you're telling yourself a lie. And so it's time to call a timeout, take a closer look, and drop into that deeper sense of truth so that you can begin again. Because that's what we're doing all the time, is we're starting afresh. We're approaching it with this beginner's mind to, take a step in one direction, check in, see how it feels, take another step, see how it feels. And that doesn't mean that the feelings won't change. And that again is huge for wholehearted living, is giving yourself that space, that room to breathe and to grow. Because, like if we made ourselves stick to decisions that we made half a lifetime ago, I mean, that would be a pretty boring life, right? I mean, we wouldn't feel like we're growing at all. I hate to think what my life would look like if I made myself stick to those decisions when I was 20 years old. That wouldn't be too fun, I don't think. So yeah, it's so important to give ourselves permission to turn left, to change our minds whenever we want to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's part of being brave, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. Because it's very natural for fear to arise when you start to think about changing gears, you know, because we live in relationship with other people. And of course, our decisions have an impact on other people. So it's very natural as, you know, as social creatures to not want to rock the boat. Like a huge reason why we're all still here is because our ancestors got along well enough with each other in particular cases for the rest of us to continue. And obviously not without conflict, that's not what I'm saying, but to a certain extent, we had this sense of taking care of one another in order to be able to survive the elements and survive life's challenges. And so obviously it's very vital that we do get along with others. It's important for our survival. So that's going to be wired into us as well. But we have a lot more leeway than we're giving ourselves. You know, people will make room for our desires, but we're really teaching them how to treat us. We're teaching people what to expect from us. And so it's actually amazing to see when people start to do this, when we start to live this way, how quickly other people kind of meet you where you are in the new place. I was even just speaking with a client this morning who started to say no at work more often. She used to be the one who, you know, everybody came to her for everything. So she'll say no more often. And people are really respecting that and recognizing that they themselves would maybe like to start doing that too. And so, you know, it's often we're not going to rock the boat nearly as much as we think we are, and even that we'll be able to navigate it if we keep our compassion with us. You know, just recognizing that it's difficult for everybody, and being able to drop into our bodies and use some self-care strategies and stress relief tools to help ourselves come down from those difficult moments. And you know, sometimes those difficult moments are growth moments. So all of that self-care stuff that we use just to relieve stress at the beginning, all remains true when we need some relief from the stress that we're kind of imposing on ourselves by flexing our growth muscles.
Yeah, and it's so good to hear that a client of yours is learning to say no, because I think a lot of us do struggle with that. I know I certainly have in the past. You say yes to everything and you end up working more hours than you humanly should, or just going beyond, and that's part of tuning in. Know that now, looking back.
Of course.
It's a big thing for people to start saying no.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And that's why those baby steps are so important. You know, it's a learnable skill. It's something that you can actually learn at any age. It's never too late. And so just giving yourself the opportunity to do it in small ways first will help to build up your strength and your courage for those things that feel a little bit hotter, a little bit more where the stakes feel higher.
Yeah, and with the dropping into your body, do you sort of encourage any breathing techniques or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. So there are tons of different breathing techniques, of course, that are very useful in this particular way. But I would say, especially if you're just starting off, just noticing your breath as it is, and maybe deepening and lengthening your breath a little bit is enough to just be able to get that felt sense. You know, 3 long, deep breaths is a great way to just really connect with the physicality of your own body and to sense your own presence. So yeah, we can keep it really simple. I'm a really big fan of that because you don't want to have to learn a whole new song and dance to be able to start implementing some of these amazing strategies. These are things that you can use right now. These are things that are kind of innate within us. You know, breathing deeply is something that's really accessible. So yeah, just a few long, deep breaths are a good place to start to be able to just reconnect with yourself physically a little bit more.
Yeah, and just it's like a little timeout. So you can do that anywhere, really, can't you?
Yeah.
So.
Even in the presence of other people, even in a meeting, you know, for all I know, you could be sitting here doing some long, deep breathing the whole time I'm talking. I would have no idea, right? So yeah, or when you're in transit, going somewhere, anytime, any place, it's always with you. So that's why I like tools like the breath so much, because it's always there.
Yeah, and it's a really good one, which ties in with all your tips, but also for people who are feeling anxious and stressed and worried. Then just do the breaths first to calm yourself down, and then start aligning. Goes, oh, I can't do this possibly now. I'm too wound up and everything's chaotic and the children are screaming and the dogs are barking.
Real life is happening. Yes.
Real life. Yeah. So you can just breathe and tune in.
Absolutely. And I've used a lot of breathing techniques. I've taught yoga in some clinical settings as well. And it's so powerful to like you said, help calm us down from anxious moments. It gets our heart rate back down again. It helps our muscles physically relax. And so physiologically, it's one of those tools that we're meant to experience whenever we need to kind of turn the volume down, turn the intensity down a little bit.
Yeah, because I know for me, when I'm getting anxious or stressed, it's my breath gets shallower. So it's something I've had to work on over the years. That's because as it gets shallower, I get more stressed. So yeah,
it's that cycle, right? It kind of doubles around on itself. Stress begets stress begets stress.
Absolutely does. It's well, we're starting to run out of time. So I was just wondering if you had any last words of wisdom that you wanted to leave all our viewers with.
I would like to share another quote, if I may. It's a different one, but another one that I've carried with me for a long time, for many years. And it goes like this. It says, peace. It does not mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means being in the midst of these things and still being calm in your heart. And I think that's really what we've been talking about today, is this notion of being able to drop beneath the noise, whether it's the noise out there in the world or the noise in our own minds, to settle into ourselves and to be with ourselves exactly as we are, giving space for our own experience.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to wrap things up for the day. Thank you so much for that. And I'll be sure to post those into the Facebook group.
Wonderful. I wanted to also mention just quickly that the body compass activity that we were exploring together, we do also have that recording for participants today, so that if you're looking for a way to actually use that tool, I've recorded a meditation that will help you to relax, drop into your body, and kind of test out your decisions. So something that you can take away with you to put some of it into practice right away.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. I'm sure our viewers will all click on that link and go and try it out.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me, Iona. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Bye.
Bye.